The girl who dug up the town's darkest secret. They thought it was just another quiet town. Ravenshill, all charm on the surface, tree-lined streets, a school that smiled too wide, and a little girl who asked too many questions. But the truth didn't lie in the town square. It lay buried beneath a maple tree, and the only one who could smell it had 4 legs. It started the day Lina heard a whimper from the cliff's edge and found an injured German shepherd clinging to life. She saved him, nursed him, gave him a name, Kairo. But Kairo didn't come alone. He brought a story the town had tried to forget. And when he began digging at the roots behind Lina's house, the past clawed its way back. Inside that box were 23 baby teeth, each labeled with the name of a child who was never found. What began as a rescue would unravel a secret hidden for 9 years, and the monster behind it, hiding in plain sight. The heat hung in the air like a heavy curtain, suffocating and still. The sun above Ravenshill Ridge blazed mercilessly, turning the pale limestone cliffside into a mirror of light. From the cracked back porch of a weather-worn house at the edge of the woods, Lina Moore, 10 years old and barefoot, squinted into the haze, a basket of laundry resting against her hip. It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon. Her mother had left for the hospital early that morning, double shift again. Lina had promised, like she always did, to stay inside, lock the doors, and not wander near the ridge. But something was wrong. A sound had pulled her from the hum of cicadas and the creak of clothesline rope. Faint, then clearer. A sound that didn't belong to the sun-drenched quiet. A whimper. Fragile. Raw. Alive. Lina froze. The sound came again, just at the edge of hearing. Almost like a child. Almost like an animal. Not a bird, not a fox. It was deeper than that. Throatier, desperate. She dropped the laundry basket without realizing it, socks and scrubs scattering like leaves. Stepping past the sagging fence, Lina followed the sound, her heart beginning to race. Not with fear, not yet, but with something older, a kind of gravity she didn't understand. The path behind the house wound through a thin line of trees, down into the undergrowth that hugged the base of Ravenshill Ridge. Her sneakers crunched over brittle pine needles, over chalky white stones that had tumbled loose over time. She knew this trail. She wasn't supposed to. Her mother had forbidden it after they moved in last fall. "The ridge isn't safe," she'd warned. "3 kids have died up there in the last 10 years. Lina had nodded, like a good daughter should, but that hadn't stopped her from tracing every bend of the cliffside during quiet mornings before school. She climbed now with purpose, not hesitation, breath shallow in the summer heat. The sound grew louder, a whimper, sharp and choked off, echoing through the stone like something in pain was trying not to scream. Lina rounded a corner and stopped so fast the dust on the path swirled around her ankles. There, on a narrow limestone ledge jutting out from the cliff wall, was a dog, a large one. Its fur, a mottled, dusty tan streaked with blood, lay matted against its ribs. One of its front legs hung unnaturally off the edge. The dog trembled, ears flattened, and turned its head toward her. Its eyes met hers. Amber, deep, wounded, and aware. Lina's breath caught. Her mind told her to run, to go home, call the sheriff, do something safe and smart. But something else held her there. It wasn't just the wound or the whimper or the fact that the dog's body looked moments from giving up. It was the look in those eyes. They weren't pleading, they weren't panicked, they were saying, "Don't leave me." Lina looked down the cliffside 30 feet at least. Jagged rocks waited like hungry mouths. Then back at the dog. "No," she whispered almost to herself. "No, I'm not going to leave you." She scanned the slope for a safer way down, but there wasn't one. The ledge the dog lay on was only accessible by hugging the cliff wall barely a foot wide, sloping downward. One bad step, one shift of loose gravel, and she joined the ridge's legend of tragedy. But still, she moved. Each step was a breath held. Her fingers scraped for holes in the limestone, chalking her skin with dust. She kept her body pressed to the stone, inching sideways toward the trembling dog. Pebbles skittered beneath her sneakers and tumbled into the void. "Almost there," she whispered, not to the dog, but to herself. "Almost there." The animal didn't move, only watched. Halfway across the ledge, a sharp sound cracked beneath her foot. The rock shifted. Lina gasped as a fist-sized piece of stone broke loose, plummeting silently for a heartbeat before smashing against the boulders below. Dust rose. So did the heat in her throat. "Don't look down," she begged herself. "Just don't." A voice rang out in the distance. "Lina!" She turned her head just enough to see a truck parked haphazardly at the base of the ridge, a figure in uniform, running, fast. Sheriff Donovan Walsh, her neighbor, always kind, always tired. He was yelling, waving something orange in his hand. "Lina, don't move." But she wasn't listening. The dog whimpered again, barely audible. Its body slumped forward, paw slipping. It was going to fall. "No," Lina whispered, urgency surging through her like fire. "No, no, no, I'm almost there." She took the final 2 steps in a rush, dropped to her knees, and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck just as its body began to slide. The ledge groaned beneath their combined weight. Dust, falling stones. A scream caught in the back of her throat. But the ledge held. So did she. "Got you," Lina panted, pulling the heavy dog back from the brink. "I got you." Blood soaked into her shirt. The heat was unbearable. Her arms trembled. The dog lay still, eyes fixed on hers. Not afraid. Not anymore. Sheriff Walsh's voice drew closer. "Hold on, Lina. I'm coming up. Stay exactly where you are." But she didn't answer. Couldn't. All she could see, all she could feel, was the dog's heartbeat against her chest, the way its eyes blinked slowly. Not grateful. Trusting. The ledge was barely wide enough for her knees. Dust clung to Lina's palms as she held the weight of the German shepherd against her chest, her back pressed to the cliff like it might forgive her for what she was doing. But the stone didn't care. The heat didn't either. And time was slipping. Her arms shook from strain. The dog heavy, bloodied, unmoving rested half on her lap, half on stone, one paw still dangling just inches from nothing. His fur was coarse and matted, soaked with something warm that smeared across her shirt. Blood. But it didn't matter. He was breathing. Slow. Shallow. But breathing. "I've got you," she whispered again. Her voice cracked, too dry. "I've got you." But for how long? The sun scorched down from a sky so white it burned her eyes. Sweat ran down the back of her neck. Her fingers ached from clinging to the limestone, nails chipped and chalked with dust. Beneath her, the ground dropped away into a hollow silence filled with jagged rocks and forgotten names. She didn't dare look down. She didn't have to. The absence of ground was enough. Footsteps scrambled up the ridge. A voice called out, again closer now. "Lina! Lina! Don't move!" She turned her head. Sheriff Donovan Walsh was scaling the slope like a man possessed, rope coiled over one shoulder, face pale under his wide-brimmed hat. His boot slipped once, sent a small avalanche of pebbles down the ridge, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. Lina's arms trembled. She looked down at the dog's side, trying to find where the wound ended and the fur began. It was bad. A deep puncture near the shoulder. Not a cut from a fall. A bullet. Someone had shot this dog. Her breath hitched. Her body wanted to shake, but she couldn't let it. Not now. The dog's head lay heavy in her lap, his eyes barely open, but watching her. He wasn't crying anymore, just waiting. "Sheriff," she shouted hoarsely. "He's hurt." "I see him," Walsh yelled back. "Don't move, I'm almost there." She could hear the rope unwinding behind him, the scrape of metal carabiners. He wasn't young, 50-something, with stiff knees and too many late nights, but he climbed like he'd left age behind at the base of the ridge. Lina shifted, trying to pull the dog further onto the ledge. Her right foot slipped. Pebbles skittered off into nothing. She gasped, heart leaping into her throat, and froze. "Don't move. Just don't move." The ledge groaned beneath her weight. She waited, counted to 5, then kept counting. 10, 15. When she reached 20, she exhaled slowly and tried again, inching backward, pulling the dog with her. Each movement stole another piece of strength from her arms. "Hey," she murmured, her voice cracking from the heat. "You have to help me just a little, okay? I'm not strong enough on my own." The dog blinked once. His ear twitched. And then, miraculously, he tried to shift. Just a little. A front paw dragged against the rock. A low grunt rattled from his chest. "Good boy," Lina breathed. Her chest ached from holding back tears. "You're a good boy." The ledge shook as Sheriff Walsh climbed the last stretch, sweat dripping from his jawline. His eyes locked on hers. They were wide, terrified. "My God," he breathed. "Lina, honey, you shouldn't be here." "I couldn't leave him," she whispered. Her voice was barely there. Walsh didn't scold her, didn't shout, just moved quickly. "Okay, listen to me. We're going to get you and that dog off this ledge, all right? But you have to stay still." He wedged himself against the ridge wall, anchoring the rope, and leaned down with cautious hands. Lina flinched as he reached toward her. "I've got you. Give me his weight." Lina hesitated. The dog had stopped trembling. His body had gone still, not lifeless, but surrendered, as if he'd passed everything he had into her. She eased him toward the sheriff. The dog let out a weak whine as he shifted again. Walsh grabbed his torso carefully, finding balance. "Okay, on 3, he said. "We're going to slide him up to me, nice and easy. Ready?" Lina nodded. Her whole body felt hollow now, like the heat had evaporated everything except her pulse. 1, 2, 3. They moved in unison. The dog groaned low in his throat, and for a moment it felt like the ridge would give, like the rock would crumble and take them all. But it held. Sheriff Walsh got the dog over his lap, cradled him awkwardly but securely. "You next," he said. "Give me your hands." She did. Her palms were raw, skin split across one knuckle. He gripped her tightly and didn't let go. Inch by inch, They backed off the ledge, the dog's body between them, the cliff yawning just inches away. When they reached a stable patch of rock, Lina collapsed into the dirt, gasping, the world spinning above her in dizzy blue. Sheriff Walsh lay the dog down gently beside her. His breath came hard. His chest rose and fell like a piston, but his hands moved with surprising tenderness as he checked the animal's pulse. "Still alive," he said, relief washing over his voice. "You did good, Lina." Lina turned toward the dog. The eyes were still open, dull, but present. Amber. Familiar. Watching. "You hear that?" she whispered, brushing the matted fur away from his face. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time, the dog's tail moved. Not a wag, just a thump. Faint, tired, but alive. The siren's wail echoed low in the distance, a sound too big for such a quiet town. It bounced off the ridge, rolled over rooftops, and faded into the dry hush of summer. But on the slope above the tree line, time had already slowed to a crawl. The German shepherd lay on a canvas rescue blanket beside the patrol truck, barely breathing. His flank rose and fell in uneven rhythm, chest trembling with effort. Blood still seeped from his shoulder, darkening the white gauze Sheriff Donovan Walsh had hastily pressed there. The dog's fur was matted, streaked with dirt, sweat, and sun-dried rust. But his eyes, they were still open, and they never left Lina Moore. She knelt beside him, silent, her scraped knees pressing into gravel, her knuckles still chalked with the cliff's limestone. Her hands hovered inches above his fur, afraid to touch, afraid he might vanish if she broke whatever held them together. Amber eyes met hazel ones, old soul meeting young. And in that gaze, something passed between them. Not language, not instinct, but a kind of recognition. Something ancient, something wordless. He was trying to speak, and she impossibly understood. "You found me," she whispered, as if it were the dog, not her, who had done the saving. "I didn't know what I was looking for, but you knew." A harsh voice broke the spell. "Lina Moore!" Lina flinched as her mother came running down the path from the other side of the ridge, her nurse's scrubs still on, shoes covered in red Georgia dust. Kara Moore's face was a portrait of fury, fear, and disbelief tangled into one. "My God," she gasped, dropping to her knees and grabbing Lina by the shoulders. "What were you doing out there? You could have died. You could have—" Sheriff Walsh held up a calming hand. "Easy, Kara. She's okay. A few scrapes. Nothing broken." "Scrapes?" Her voice cracked. "She was clinging to the side of a damn cliff. She was saving him," Walsh said quietly, nodding toward the dog. Kara looked down at the animal for the first time. For a moment, no one spoke. The dog let out a faint exhale. Not a whine, not a growl, just breath. "She carried his weight," Walsh added, "across that ledge. I saw it. I don't know how she did it." Kara turned to her daughter. Her face softened, but her voice was still thick with disbelief. "Why, Lina? Why would you risk everything for a stray?" Lina didn't answer right away. She looked back down at the dog's face, because he wasn't just a stray. She didn't know how she knew that. She just did, the same way the wind knows which way to blow, the same way the stars know how to burn. "He's not a stray," she said quietly. "He's someone." Walsh tilted his head, frowning a little. You mean like he belongs to someone? No, Lina said, firmer this time. I mean, he is someone. He remembers things. The dog blinked slowly as if confirming it. I don't know how to explain it, Lina whispered. But I looked into his eyes and it was like he knew me. Like he was trying to tell me something. Sheriff Walsh looked between the girl and the animal, something unreadable passing over his face. The kind of expression a man wears when logic and instinct go to war. The air shifted. A breeze stirred the pine branches overhead, cooling the sweat on Lina's brow, the dust on the sheriff's boots, the blood drying on the dog's side. It was stillness, not silence, the kind that comes before something important. We'll get him to the vet, Walsh said finally. Dr. Hyland's out for the weekend, but Dr. Lauren at the emergency clinic can handle this. I'm riding with him, Lina said immediately. Her mother started to protest, but Walsh nodded. It's okay, Kara. She can ride up front with me. I'll text you the clinic address. You can follow. Reluctantly, Kara gave a tight nod. As Walsh and a deputy gently lifted the dog onto a stretcher, Lina stayed at his side, whispering soft reassurances, words she didn't even realize she was saying, just rhythm, tone, presence. The moment they loaded him into the back of the truck, Lina climbed into the passenger seat. Sheriff Walsh pulled the door closed and looked at her. What are we calling him? He asked, glancing in the rearview mirror toward the dog. Lina paused. She didn't want to name him like a pet. This wasn't a goldfish from the fair or a stray cat on the porch. He was more than that, something weightier, a memory with fur. And then, like a whisper in the back of her mind, it came. Kairo, she said. His name is Kairo. Walsh raised an eyebrow. Like the city? She shook her head. No, like a compass. The kind that always finds true north. The sheriff gave a slow, approving nod. Kairo it is. As the truck rumbled to life and rolled down the ridge trail toward the town, Lina looked out the window, but her eyes weren't focused on the trees or the light or the sun sinking low over the rooftops. She was thinking about that look, those eyes. Kairo hadn't barked. He hadn't growled. He hadn't even cried, but something in him had spoken louder than any scream, and Lina had listened. What she didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that this moment, this connection, this girl and this dog, had just cracked open a secret 9 years in the making, and nothing in Ravenshill would ever be the same again. From a distance, Ravenshill looked like something borrowed from an old postcard. Too quiet, too quaint, too stubborn to keep up with the world spinning beyond the trees. White picket fences stood at angles softened by ivy. Porch swings creaked in the breeze. And on Sunday mornings, the church bell rang like clockwork, calling a congregation that barely filled the pews anymore. To outsiders, it was a town built for second chances and fresh starts. But Lina Moore had started to notice the cracks. They didn't scream. They whispered. Whispers like the strange gaps on the community bulletin board posters long since taken down. Thumbtacks still stuck in the cork. Whispers in the way adults changed the subject when certain names came up. Whispers in how Sheriff Walsh's eyes grew heavy whenever someone said, "Just another runaway." It started small. A passing comment from Mrs. Ellery at the grocery store. Back in the day, we used to let kids walk home without worry, before all that trouble started. Lina had tilted her head. What trouble? But Mrs. Ellery only gave a tight-lipped smile and waved it off like it was smoke. Still, the words stayed. Then came the day at the town library, a week after the rescue. Her mother was working a double shift, and Kairo was still recovering at the emergency clinic. Lina walked past the rows of mystery novels and gardening guides and wandered, without knowing why, into the Ravenshill archive room. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. Dust coated the binders like skin. She pulled down a file labeled Community Affairs 2013 and sat cross-legged on the floor. That was when she saw the first name, Jaden Blake. Age 8, disappeared on his way to school. No body, no evidence, just vanished. The next file held another, Camila Reyes, age 11. Last seen leaving the library. Again, no leads, no trace. Just a photo, a girl with a crooked smile and one dimple. File after file, year after year, a pattern unfolded in silence. 9 years, 13 missing children, all unresolved. Lina's fingers trembled as she flipped pages, her stomach curled in on itself. None of these kids had returned, not one, and no one was talking about it. She leaned over a dusty drawer labeled Press Clippings and began pulling out yellowed pages. Each disappearance had earned a headline once. Local police had promised investigations. Community meetings were held. But as months passed, the town moved on. The silence wasn't accidental. It was curated. A quiet agreement. Don't dig too deep. Don't reopen wounds. Don't disturb the illusion. But Lina, she couldn't look away. She pushed her notebook across the floor and began scribbling the names in a list, her handwriting small and neat. Jaden, Camila, Thomas, Ari, Noah, Penelope, Mason, Olivia, Liam. Her pen stopped on the 9th name. Tyler Callahan, age 7. Disappeared with his dog, a German Shepherd puppy. No one had seen him since. Her hand tightened on the page. Something itched in the back of her mind, a memory not hers, but familiar. Kairo's eyes. Amber. Intelligent. Like he'd once waited for someone who never came home. Was it him? Was he the same dog? She didn't know. Not yet. But her gut had already whispered yes. Later that evening, when her mom finally got home and collapsed on the couch, Lina brought the library's borrowed clippings to the kitchen table. She waited until the clock read past 9 p.m., when her mother's voice softened, when her walls lowered, and she asked, "Do you remember hearing about a boy named Tyler Callahan?" Her mother blinked slowly as if waking up. "Where'd you hear that name?" "The library," Lina answered carefully. "There were articles." Kara stared ahead, silent for a beat too long. "I remember," she said finally. "That was a long time ago. He just vanished. No ransom note, no signs of struggle, just gone. His parents were wrecked." "Did he really have a German Shepherd puppy?" Kara looked toward the window, thinking. "Yeah. His name was Ranger, I think. Cute little thing. I remember seeing flyers for both of them for weeks." Lina looked down at her clippings. A low pulse started in her ears. "What happened to the dog?" Her mom hesitated. "They found him wandering near the creek 2 days later. Collar still on. No boy." The silence settled again. This time, heavier. Kara reached over and gently touched her daughter's wrist. "Lina, honey, why are you asking about this?" Lina didn't know how to answer without sounding crazy, that the dog in her dreams was the same one lying sedated at the vet, that his eyes had told her things no human voice had, that she felt something in her bones she couldn't name. "Because I think someone's lying," she said instead, "or everyone's forgotten. And I don't think they're supposed to." Kara stared at her a long time. Then, quietly, she said, Some towns forget because they want to, others because they need to. But forgetting doesn't make it go away. The word stayed with Lina long after her mother had gone to bed. She sat at the kitchen table alone, the clippings spread before her like puzzle pieces, waiting for a child brave enough to put them back together. The truth was this: Ravenshill wore its reputation like a borrowed dress, pretty on the outside, unraveling at the seams. But now the seams were coming apart, and Lina Moore, 10 years old and already too old for her own good, had decided she wasn't going to let it go unnoticed anymore. Not while Kairo was still trying to tell her something. Not while names were still waiting to be spoken aloud. Not while someone in this town knew exactly what had happened to those children. The stitches along Kairo's side hadn't fully dissolved, but he moved like a soldier trained not to show pain. It had been 5 days since the cliff. 5 days since Lina sat beside him in the emergency clinic, fingers tangled in his fur, whispering that he'd be safe now, that he didn't have to fight anymore. But some dogs don't stop fighting, especially not when something still isn't right. He'd taken up a quiet post beneath the wide canopy of the old maple tree, its roots gnarled and twisted like the knuckles of time. The tree sat behind Lina's house, casting a crooked shadow across the backyard, the same backyard where Lina had first seen him pacing the tree line. At first, she thought he just liked the shade, but then he started digging. Not playfully, not randomly, with purpose, with obsession. Every morning, just after dawn, Lina would wake to the soft, rhythmic sound of dirt being thrown aside. Kairo pawing at the base of the maple with deliberate insistence. He wouldn't respond to toys or treats or her calls, only digging. When she tried to stop him, he'd pause, look at her with those amber eyes, and return to the task with quiet defiance. It wasn't just digging, it was remembering, and it was driving her crazy. "He's going to hit a gas line or something," her mother said from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, exhaustion thick in her voice. Lina watched Kairo from the porch. "It's not random. He's looking for something." Kara glanced at her. "He's a dog, Lina. Dogs dig. Not like this." Her mother didn't argue. She just sighed and went back to her laptop. The town clinic had cut her hours again. Bills were piling up, and a dog clawing a crater into her yard was low on the list of priorities. But Lina knew better. That same afternoon, as the sun burned low behind the hills, a sleek silver sedan pulled into their driveway, its tires crunching softly against the gravel. The moment the door opened, Kairo froze, then growled. Not a warning bark, not a nervous yelp, a low guttural sound, buried deep in his chest, like instinct recognizing something the mind couldn't name. Lina stepped onto the porch, arms folded. From the car emerged Principal Reuben, Clay well-groomed, charming in that calculated way, always overdressed for the weather. He smiled as he approached, holding a folder in one hand. "Lina," he said smoothly, "you're a difficult one to track down lately. How are you feeling?" "She's fine," Kara replied before Lina could speak, stepping outside with a forced smile. "We've had a bit of excitement, but everything's back to normal." Kairo growled again, louder this time, his body tense, tail low. He took 2 slow steps forward, ears back. Principal Clay's smile twitched. "Is he all right?" "He's protective," Lina said flatly. Kara moved to put a hand on Kairo, but Lina beat her to it, placing a steadying palm on his neck. "He knows who to trust." That earned a sharp look from her mother, but Clay chuckled as if amused. "Can't blame him for being loyal." German Shepherd's smartest dogs you'll ever meet." His eyes lingered on the hole under the maple tree. "You know," he added casually, "when I was a boy, that old maple used to mark the edge of the school district. Funny how lines move." "Why are you here?" Lina asked, her voice calm but cold. Clay glanced at her mother before answering. "We're putting together a summer enrichment program at the school. A week of science labs, art workshops, that sort of thing. I thought Lina might benefit from it. Engage her curiosity." Kara took the folder from his hand. "That sounds great. Lord knows she could use a distraction this summer." "I'm not going," Lina said. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "You haven't even looked at it." Kairo barked sharply, stepping between Lina and Clay. It was enough to make the principal flinch, even if only for a split second. "That's quite the dog you've got there," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Hard to train loyalty like that. It usually comes with history." Lina's eyes narrowed. "He remembers things." Clay gave her a long look, then smiled again, all warmth and teeth. "Well, perhaps we'll see you at orientation." He turned back toward the car, the sun flashing off his windshield as he slid behind the wheel. Only once the vehicle disappeared down the road did Kairo relax, just barely. Lina knelt beside him, pressing her forehead gently against his. "I saw it," she whispered, "the way he looked at you. Like he knew you." Kairo didn't move. "He was lying," she added. "All of it. That program? He doesn't want me learning anything. He wants me gone." Her fingers brushed across his fur, still coarse from the dried dirt around the maple roots. "I think he knows what you're trying to find," she murmured. "And I think you're running out of time." The wind stirred the leaves above them, sending a few spiraling to the ground. Kairo turned his head, eyes locked once again on the forest line. The same place he'd stared before, the same place he growled at when no one was there. Except now, Lina believed someone was. Watching, waiting. The morning broke differently. There was no birdsong, no wind rustling through the maple's aging leaves. Just a stillness dense and unmoving that settled over the backyard like the breath before a scream. Kairo was already digging. Lina had woken early, stirred by something she couldn't name. Not a sound exactly, more a pull, a tightening in the chest. She slipped on her shoes and padded barefoot out the back door, the screen creaking as it closed behind her. And there he was, at the base of the old maple tree, shoulders straining, claws tearing into the damp earth with an urgency she hadn't seen before. His sides heaved, his paws were soaked, but he wouldn't stop. "Kairo?" she whispered. He didn't look at her. He dug like something was screaming underneath the ground, and only he could hear it. The soil gave way faster than usual. Lina stepped closer, heart stammering, watching clumps of mud fly behind him. Then suddenly his claws scraped metal, a sharp, unmistakable clang. He froze, and for a moment the world exhaled. Lina dropped to her knees beside him. The hole wasn't wide, but it was deep. At the bottom, half buried and caked in rust and dirt, sat a metal box, no larger than a lunch tin, dented at the corners, its lock long since corroded into nothing. Kairo took a single step back and sat, chest rising and falling rapidly. Like he was waiting. Lina reached in with trembling fingers and pulled the box free. It was heavier than it looked. The weight didn't come from metal. It came from what was inside. She pried it open and stopped breathing. Inside were small plastic bags, neatly packed and sealed. 23 of them, each containing what looked like a baby tooth, some pristine, some yellowed, all unmistakably human. Attached to each bag was a tiny note, a name, a date, a child. A day they disappeared. Her vision swam, the air thinned. She read the first, Jaden Blake, 07/03/2013. She knew that name. It was the first one on her list. The boy who vanished on his way to school. She reached for another. Camila Reyes, 10/29/2014. Another from the library archives, the girl with the dimple. Another, Liam Becker, 05/10/2017. Another, Tyler Callahan, 12/17/2020. Her hands started to shake, not just from horror, but from the cold realization. This box was proof. Proof the town had buried something far worse than rumors. Proof that someone had kept track. Proof that these weren't just disappearances. They were taken, labeled, counted. She looked at the tree towering above her, its roots still trembling from the disturbance. How long had this sat here? Right beneath them? Had someone placed it here to be found or to be forgotten? Kairo leaned against her side, gently. His warmth anchored her. She looked down at the final note in the box. Subject, number 24, pending placement. No name, no date. Just a placeholder. Lina's throat tightened. Pending. That meant there was still time for one more. One more name, one more child. And someone was planning it. She clutched the box to her chest and stood. Her knees were stained brown, her fingers raw, her breath shallow. Kairo, she whispered, voice trembling. You knew. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He just looked at her with those amber eyes, still and wide, like he'd been waiting for someone who could understand. And now that she did, he didn't look away. Behind her, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees. She turned and ran. She didn't tell her mother. Not yet. Kara had been distant all week, stressed, overworked, snapping easily. She wouldn't believe her, not without dismissing it as imagination or fear. And part of Lina didn't want her mom to carry the weight of this. Not yet. Instead, Lina shoved the box into her backpack, zipped it tight, and climbed onto her bike. Kairo followed alongside her, limping slightly, but refusing to stay behind. They reached the sheriff's office just past 9. Sheriff Walsh was halfway through his second coffee when Lina burst in. He stood immediately. "Lina, I need to show you something," she said. She dropped the backpack onto his desk and opened it. When he saw what was inside, he didn't speak. His fingers moved carefully, lifting one of the bags as if it might break from weight alone. "I recognize these names," he murmured. "I do too," Lina whispered. "They're the missing kids." Sheriff Walsh exhaled long and slow. He picked up the final note, the one without a name. Then he looked up at her, his voice rough. "Where did you find this?" "Under the old maple," she said. "Kairo dug it up." Walsh looked at the dog, who stood silently by the door, and in that moment he believed her. "I need you to keep this between us," he said quietly. "Can you do that?" Lina nodded, her eyes wide. Walsh leaned in. "And Lina, no matter what anyone says, stay away from Principal Clay. Do you understand me?" Her lips parted. "You think it's him?" "I think," he said, "that dog knows a hell of a lot more than we do." He locked the box in the safe, then turned to the window, staring out at the street, where nothing looked out of place, but everything had changed. Beneath the perfect paint and smiling storefronts, Ravenshill was bleeding. And only now. Someone had finally ripped the bandage off. The blinds were drawn. The office smelled of old paper, burnt coffee, and something older like regret that had soaked into the walls over years of unsolved endings. Sheriff Donovan Walsh sat stiffly at his desk, sleeves rolled to the elbows, glasses perched low on his nose. A single desk lamp cast a small circle of light onto the wood, barely enough to illuminate the box between them. The box of teeth. It had taken everything in him not to tremble when Lina first placed it there. But now, with the door locked and the room sealed from eyes and ears, he allowed himself to feel the weight of it. Not just its metal casing, but the ghostly burden inside. Names, children, lives reduced to dental fragments and cryptic labels. Lina sat across from him, fingers nervously tracing the zipper of her jacket. Kairo rested by her side, eyes half closed but ears alert. Even after all he'd been through, he wouldn't leave her. Not in this place, not with these truths unfolding. "Let's go through them one by one," Walsh said, voice low. He pulled a yellowed folder from his drawer, Ravenshill missing persons, minors, a file he hadn't dared open in nearly 4 years. He flipped it open. The first bag Lina handed him bore the name Jaden Blake, 07/03/2013. "Jaden," Walsh repeated, pulling a report from the folder. 7 years old, disappeared walking home from St. Paul's Primary. No witnesses, no signs of struggle. Parents claimed he never made it past the corner bakery. He set the report beside the bag. Next came Camilla Reyes, 10/29/2014. "Camilla," he muttered, tugging out a second report. "Last seen at the Fall Carnival. Her red sweater was found in a porta-john 2 blocks away. We thought it was a runaway." He paused. "We were wrong." One by one, Lina handed over the rest. Liam Becker, Tyler Callahan, Naomi Ellis, 23 reports, 23 bags, all matched. Some had dates that spanned nearly a decade, but all were from within Ravenshill County lines. Walsh ran his fingers through his graying hair, eyes closed for a long beat. "This box, it's a ledger," he finally said. "Someone's been keeping score." Lina's voice barely escaped her throat. "Why teeth?" Walsh looked at her. "DNA proof, portable, silent. You don't need to keep files when you keep a piece of the child. It's old school, it's methodical, like someone cataloging trophies." The room went still. A file slipped off the stack and landed on the floor with a soft thud. Cairo's ears twitched. Walsh leaned back slowly. "These weren't random," he said. "Someone's been orchestrating this for years." "But who?" Lina whispered. Walsh hesitated. Then he stood, walked over to a locked cabinet, and retrieved a manila envelope from the very back. He tossed it gently on the desk. 3 years ago," he said, "I started a quiet investigation, off the books. I couldn't shake the feeling that the cases weren't isolated. There were patterns, dates, locations, proximity to certain properties." He opened the envelope and slid out a map. Red pins dotted various areas across Ravenshill County, schools, parks, abandoned facilities. Lina leaned in. And there, right near the edge of the woods behind her house, was a red pin marked MT. "Maple tree," Walsh said, confirming her thought. "And here, see that?" He pointed to a cluster near the edge of town. A pin labeled RC. "Ravenshill Central," Lina said, recognizing the abbreviation. Walsh nodded. "Your school?" Her chest tightened. "You think it's someone at the school?" she said. I think whoever's behind this knew how to move unnoticed, he replied. And who has more access to kids than an administrator? Lina didn't need him to say the name. Principal Clay. She looked down at Kairo, who hadn't taken his eyes off the sheriff. He growled at him, she whispered. The day he visited. Walsh nodded. Dogs remember things we forget. Smells, sounds, energy. He reached across the desk and gently placed a hand on the box. This is enough to reopen every single case. But if I go public now, I risk tipping off whoever's behind it. We need more. Evidence, witnesses, locations. He looked directly at Lina. I need you to trust me. And I need you to stay safe. Lina stared at him, then slowly nodded. Walsh slid the box into a larger container, sealed it, and moved it to his personal vault behind the bookshelf. Then he returned to his desk, weary but resolute. Lina, he said gently, thank you for not being afraid to look. She swallowed hard. I was afraid, but you didn't stop. Outside, the wind stirred the flag hanging above the sheriff's office, its flapping rhythmic and solemn. Inside, the old clock ticked louder than usual, and beneath the surface of this quiet town, a storm was building. One name at a time, one tooth at a time. The knock came just after noon, 3 soft raps, evenly spaced, like someone counting in their head before striking a match. Lina froze on the staircase. She knew that rhythm. From the kitchen, her mother's voice floated out. Lina, it's Principal Clay. Come say hello. Her stomach twisted. Kairo, dozing by the front door, lifted his head before she could even move. His body tensed, nose twitching. The low rumble in his throat was instant. Not bark, not whine. Warning. Lina walked down slowly, every step tight with something unspoken. She rounded the corner and saw him, Reuben Clay, standing just inside the doorway, all smiles and perfect posture. He wore a tan blazer, not a single thread out of place. His gray-blue eyes flicked to her the moment she appeared. There she is, he said, voice smooth as syrup. Our brave little adventurer. Lina said nothing. Kairo moved to her side, pressing against her leg like a barrier that breathed. I was just checking in on how she's doing, Clay continued, addressing her mother. Heard from some staff that there was quite the incident last week. Cliffside rescue, was it? Kara gave a strained smile. Yes, but she's fine now. We've had quite enough excitement for one summer. Oh, I'm sure, Clay chuckled, but his eyes were fixed not on Lina, but out the back window. The yard's changed, he remarked suddenly. Kara followed his gaze. The dog's been digging. It's been a pain, honestly. I see, he said. Something in his voice shifted. Barely. He stepped closer to the glass, peering toward the base of the maple tree. The soil there, still unsettled, looked like a healed wound barely scabbed over. And in that moment, Lina saw it, just for a flicker. The break in the mask. His smile remained, but his gaze went hollow, detached, calculating. Behind her, Kairo's growl deepened. Clay turned. Is he always like this? Lina answered quickly. Only with people he doesn't like. It slipped out too fast. Clay raised an eyebrow, then smiled again. Smart dog. He took a casual step toward Kairo, hand outstretched. Kairo lunged, just a fraction. A muscle twitch, a snarl. Clay stopped mid-reach, eyes narrowing, before retreating with a small laugh. I suppose he's made up his mind. I'd listen to him if I were you, Lina said. Her mother shot her a warning glance, but Clay just chuckled and waved it off. I understand, I do. Trauma makes children protective, especially after something as frightening as what Lina went through. He stepped back toward the front door, hands clasped behind his back. Well, I won't take up more of your afternoon, he said, but I did bring something. He handed Kara a large manila envelope with the school's seal on it. A special opportunity, he explained. We're offering a summer enrichment program for select students, small group, high achievers, lots of one-on-one attention. We think Lina would benefit from it greatly. Kara blinked. I wasn't aware of any new programs. It's still being finalized, Clay replied smoothly. But the curriculum is strong. Math, science, creative thinking, and of course, supervised outdoor exploration. Perfect for curious minds like Lina's. He glanced at her as he said it. The hair on her arms stood on end. Kairo let out a low, vibrating growl again. Well, Clay added, stepping outside, I'll let you two discuss it. Then, with a grin too wide for the weather, he added, Give the pup my best. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut. Only when his car had disappeared down the road did Lina finally breathe. Her mother looked at her. That was rude. He's not who he pretends to be, Lina said. Kara frowned. Lina, don't start. I'm not starting anything, she said. But Kairo knows, and I know, and if you'd just... That's enough. The sharpness in her mom's voice sliced clean. Lina turned and walked away, Kairo at her heels. That night, Lina sat on her bed, envelope in hand. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't need to. It wasn't a gift. It was a trap, an invitation into something that had already tried to bury her. She turned it over slowly and found a sticky note attached. We nurture the best. R. Clay. She crumpled it up. Kairo climbed onto the bed beside her, resting his head on her lap. His breathing was steady now, but his body remained tense, even in rest, like something ancient in him refused to relax. Lina looked out the window past the silhouette of the maple tree, and in the stillness of that summer night she whispered, They think I'm a kid, but I know what they're hiding. Kairo stirred, ears twitching. She brushed her hand through his fur. You saw it too, in his eyes. The dog didn't move, but in that silence she heard the answer loud and clear. Yes, and that meant something very dark was watching, smiling, planning, waiting. The house had never been this quiet, not even after midnight, when wind usually whispered through the eaves and cicadas hummed softly in the trees. Tonight there was no breeze, no night sounds, only a kind of hush that pressed against the windows like something holding its breath. Lina lay awake, curled under her blanket with Kairo beside her. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his eyes were open, fixed on the window across the room. She could feel it too. That presence. It had been building since Clay's visit, a feeling like someone was leaning just out of sight, watching, waiting. Kairo lifted his head suddenly and growled low, guttural, ancient. Lina sat up. The growl didn't stop. She turned slowly toward the window. The blinds were cracked open just an inch enough to see a sliver of the yard bathed in moonlight. And beyond that, the tree line. Then she saw it. A figure, standing perfectly still, half shrouded in shadow. No flashlight, no phone, no movement, just watching. A sharp chill ran down her spine. "Kairo," she whispered. He was already off the bed, front paws on the window ledge, body tight like a bowstring. The snarl deepened. The figure didn't flinch, didn't retreat, didn't run. It simply turned and disappeared into the woods. Lina's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't some prank, it wasn't a neighbor, it wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had come to see the house, not during the day, when people could wave it off as coincidence, but in the dead of night, when only truths and hunters roamed. She slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and padded down the hall to her mom's room. But the door was shut, the white noise machine humming faintly from inside. She didn't knock, didn't wake her. Something told her it wouldn't help. Instead, she crept to the kitchen, grabbed the cordless landline, and punched in the number she now knew by heart. It rang twice. Then, Walsh. "It's me," she whispered. "He was outside." A pause. Then, "Who?" "I think it was Principal Clay, or someone working with him. He was standing at the tree line, staring at our house." Kairo, still beside her, paced like a sentinel, occasionally glancing back at the door, as if expecting it to be kicked in. The sheriff's voice came low and sharp through the receiver. "Listen to me carefully, Lina. I want you to stay away from Clay. Completely. No more conversations, no more eye contact. And if he shows up at your house again, you call me immediately." Her throat tightened. "Okay." "And something else," he added. "Don't trust anyone. Not even teachers, not counselors, not janitors. No one." She swallowed. "Why?" A beat of silence. Then Walsh said, "Because I've seen what happens when people like him hide behind trust." Something in his voice, a weight, a pain, made her lean into it, like a child gripping a flashlight in a dark room. "We're not alone in this," he continued, "but we have to be smarter, quieter, no more drawing attention. The box you found, it's shaken things. You woke something up." Lina glanced at the back window again. The woods looked still now, but she knew they weren't empty. "I think he knows," she whispered. "He suspects," Walsh corrected. "But suspicion isn't proof. Yet." Kairo nudged her leg gently. His breathing was quieter now, but his eyes remained wide and unblinking. "What if he tries to take me?" Lina asked. There was a pause long enough to feel like fear. Then Walsh said, soft but firm, "He won't. Not while I'm breathing. And not with that dog by your side." Lina didn't cry, but she wanted to. Not from fear, but from the truth of that sentence. Someone finally believed her. Someone finally stood on her side, and that meant the fight wasn't over, not even close. "Get some sleep," Walsh added. "Leave a light on, and lock every window, just for tonight." Lina nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Okay." "And Lina?" "Yeah? I meant what I said. That dog's not just protecting you. He's remembering something, something someone tried to erase." Lina looked down at Kairo, who had now returned to the base of the stairs, sitting upright like a statue guarding. She whispered into the phone, "He never forgets." "Good," the sheriff replied. "Because neither do I." She hung up. For the rest of the night, Lina slept with one hand resting on Kairo's back. And beyond the trees, in a house built on secrets, a man reviewed surveillance photos with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The sheriff's office smelled like old paper and even older secrets. It was past midnight when Sheriff Donovan Walsh unlocked the archive vault. The walls inside were lined with gray filing cabinets, thick folders bound with rusted clips and rolled-up blueprints, yellowing with time. The place hadn't been touched in years, Not really. Not since the town voted to digitize records. But some things never made it online. Some things lived in corners where dust spoke louder than history books. He flicked on the overhead light, casting harsh beams across the forgotten room. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. Only that after Lina's call last night and Cairo's near-feral behavior, something old inside him stirred again. A feeling he hadn't let surface in almost a decade. The disappearances, the unanswered reports, and now the box of teeth. He didn't need more suspicion. He needed proof. He reached for the set of blueprints marked Ravenshill Unified Campus, original construction 1963. The scroll unfurled across his desk like an accusation. Thick black lines. Wing A, Wing B, Boiler Room. But then his eyes narrowed. There, etched faintly in fading ink, was a section labeled Substructure Access, Emergency Use Only. A line ran from the boiler room to a separate corridor, then to a system of narrow tunnels. Cold War era, shelter networks. A ghost beneath the school. Walsh leaned in, tracing the old paths with his finger. The network stretched farther than he remembered. Some tunnels led to decommissioned buildings, some to private homes that had changed owners so many times the town records barely matched. And then he froze. One of the terminal tunnels veered straight toward Ash Lane, Lina's house. He scanned the annotations. It was originally a caretaker's property in the 70s, then condemned, then rebuilt. The timeline fit. The soil disturbance in her yard made sense now. Not just the burial of the metal box, but access, movement, passage. He felt the pressure in his chest begin to mount. This wasn't just about buried clues. This was architecture designed to hide things. He reached for a separate folder labeled Civic Maintenance Logs, 1989 to 1995. Inside were complaints, faded memos from city engineers, and handwritten notes about structural concerns. One page caught his eye. Principal R. Clay requests sealed access of subsection 2A tunnels beneath academic wing. Claims liability concerns. Request approved by Mayor Hampton. No inspection required. The date? 4 days before the first child went missing. His hand clenched around the page. So Clay knew. Not just about the tunnels, but how to use them, how to move unnoticed, how to disappear children without ever walking out the front door. Walsh leaned back, heart pounding. He wasn't dealing with a predator operating in the shadows. He was dealing with someone who designed the shadows themselves. He folded the blueprint and stuffed it into his satchel, then grabbed the files and keys to the evidence room. If there were security logs, footage, forgotten reports, he'd find them. But he already knew what this meant. This was bigger than a single house, bigger than one missing child. This was a system someone had protected, possibly for decades. By morning, he pulled his cruiser into Lina's driveway. The sun was barely up. Mist still clung to the grass. She opened the door before he even knocked. "I didn't sleep," she said quietly. Kairo stood beside her, alert. Walsh didn't waste time. "I found something," he said. In the living room, he rolled out the blueprint across the coffee table. Kara, still in her robe, rubbed sleep from her eyes, confused. "What are we looking at?" Lina stepped closer. Her eyes widened. "That's our house," she whispered, pointing. A thin gray line ran under the property and ended at the back of the school. "It's a tunnel," Walsh said. "An old one. Used to be for Cold War evacuation. But it's been sealed, or so they said. Now I'm not so sure." He handed Lina the old maintenance report. Principal Clay requested it sealed. No inspection, no oversight, no one even asked why. Lina's hands trembled as she read it. "You think he's been using them?" she asked. "I think," Walsh said, "he's been doing it for a long time." Kara sank into a chair. "But why would he?" Lina turned. "Because no one questions a principal. Because no one questions someone who smiles while standing at your door." Kairo let out a low whine. Walsh glanced at him, then back at the blueprint. "I think this dog found the trail," he said softly. "But it's not just scent he's been following, it's memory. Familiar ground." Lina looked down. "What do we do now?" she asked. The sheriff rolled up the blueprint again. His eyes met hers. "Next time he leads you somewhere, follow him. But never alone, and never without backup." He paused, then added, "You just found the blueprint of a lie. Let's use it to build the truth." And as he left, Kairo pressed his nose to the back door, sniffing, waiting, because somewhere beneath the soil and silence of Ravenshill, the tunnels still breathed, and the dark things inside them weren't done yet. The night wrapped around Ravenshill like an old heavy coat, still oppressive and cold despite the summer heat. Rain tapped at the windows like someone trying to whisper without words. Lina lay curled under her blanket, Kairo asleep at the foot of her bed, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate rhythm. But her mind wouldn't rest, not after the blueprints, not after seeing those hollow inked lines beneath her house veins of the past, pulsing with something too old and too dark to ignore. Sleep came in fragments, pieces of silence broken by flashes of soundless screams. And then, the dream. It didn't start like a dream. It started like a memory. Lina was walking barefoot through the forest, her hands outstretched, the bark of the trees cold beneath her fingertips. There was fog, thick and breathing. The world had no color, just smears of gray and echoing silence. Then came the sound, metal rattling, a soft whimper. And suddenly, cages, dozens of them, stacked, some empty, some not. Inside, children. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, skins smeared with dirt. Some were whispering, some were silent. Some just stared at her unblinking, as if their hope had been buried under too many nights without stars. A boy stood out, blonde hair, small hands gripping the bars. He mouthed something she couldn't hear, but her heart understood. "You saw us." She stepped forward, reaching through the fog, and that's when she felt it, warmth, brushing her fingers. Kairo. In the dream, he wasn't injured. He was strong, focused, moving through shadow like he belonged to it. He nudged her hand, then turned, guiding her. She followed, through tunnels that twisted and shifted, walls breathing, floor pulsing like something alive, and then a door, metal, rusted, red handprints across the surface like fallen leaves. Kairo stopped and looked back at her, eyes glowing amber. "Wake up," the boy whispered. And she did. Lina gasped, sitting straight up in bed. The room was dark. The rain had stopped. Her skin was damp with sweat. Her chest felt tight, heart racing as if it had run through those tunnels without her. Across the room, Kairo stirred, lifting his head. Their eyes met, and for a moment she swore the dream hadn't ended at all. Kairo rose slowly, limping slightly, and padded over to her side. He placed his head on the edge of her blanket, waited, Her fingers threaded through his fur. The warmth of him grounded her, anchored her. And then she whispered, more to herself than to him, "Next time you go, I'm going with you." She said it again, this time louder, firmer. No more waiting. No more pretending adults will fix this. If you're willing to risk your life, then so am I. Kairo didn't bark. He didn't move. But his eyes stayed on her, wide and still, like he understood. Like he remembered the cages, too. The next morning, Lina packed a small bag, flashlight, notebook, energy bar. She stared at the old map she had copied from Sheriff Walsh's blueprint, tracing the tunnel line with her finger. It led from the school's rear maintenance wing to the base of the ridge, and then right under their house. The tunnels weren't just history. They were current. They were open, and someone was still using them. She zipped the bag shut. "Lina?" her mother called from downstairs. "Coming?" she replied. She looked back at Kairo, who had returned to his spot near the window. He was watching the forest line again, waiting, listening. She knelt beside him, cupped his face gently, and whispered, "Next time you show me the way, I'll follow. I promise." He didn't wag his tail, but he leaned his head into her palm. And in that moment, without barks, without words, they made a pact, the kind not even nightmares could undo. It was just after dusk when Lina slipped out the side door. The sky above Ravenshill blushed with the last embers of daylight, painting the clouds in shades of bruised orange and restless blue. She moved quickly, hoodie zipped to her chin, flashlight tucked into her back pocket. Behind her, Kairo followed silently, his limp more pronounced tonight, but his eyes never leaving the path ahead. They stuck to the shadows, past the rusted bike rack, past the old swing set where grass had begun to choke the metal legs, and finally, behind the school, where the air felt colder, heavier, like it remembered too much. Lina had passed this area 100 times. It always looked forgotten. A chain-link fence half collapsed behind tall weeds, a broken pipe protruding from the dirt like a finger no one dared to touch. But tonight was different. Kairo stopped. His ears perked. He sniffed the air, then turned toward a patch of soil beneath a leaning maintenance shed. Lina crouched beside him. And that's when she saw it. The ground was freshly disturbed dark earth, contrasting against the faded clay around it. Someone had dug recently, covered it poorly, hiding something, not planting. Beside it, set into the base of the wall, was a metal door. Not rusted, not old, new. Its hinges gleamed in the dying light. So did the keypad lock. Lina's breath caught. This wasn't forgotten architecture. This was maintained, protected. Kairo growled low, not at the door, but at the ground, like he remembered what was beneath it. Lina pressed a trembling hand to the lock. No beep, no response. It wasn't powered. But to the left, partially buried, was a narrow break in the foundation, just wide enough for a child to squeeze through. It wasn't an official entrance. It wasn't even safe. But it was real. And Kairo was already digging again, his paws furiously pulling earth away like he'd done this before. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the way gravel bit into her skin. The opening revealed a shaft sloped tight with rough concrete walls. Air wafted out, damp, cold, metallic, the kind of air that hadn't seen sunlight in years. She pulled the flashlight from her back pocket, clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness like a blade. It only went about 10 feet in before curving downward. She turned to Kairo, heart hammering. "This is it, isn't it?" He didn't bark, just stared at the hole. tense, then looked back at her, waiting. She set the flashlight between her teeth and began to crawl. The space tightened quickly. Dust rose with each shift of her knees. Roots tangled across the ceiling like veins under skin. Her breath echoed too loudly, but she kept going. 2 feet in, 4 feet, 8, almost there. And then hands, rough, sudden, grabbing her ankles. Lina screamed, reflex, raw and animal. The flashlight fell from her mouth and clattered against stone, spinning wildly. She kicked hard, once, twice, her foot catching something soft and human. The grip tightened. "No!" she shouted, twisting. But before fear could bloom into panic, a snarl, a blur, a crash. Kairo lunged into the shaft with a sound Lina had never heard from him before. Not pain, not warning, rage. There was a thud, a grunt, a sharp curse muffled in the tunnel's narrow throat. Lina scrambled forward, heart slamming into her ribs. Behind her the struggle continued, a blur of growls, fists, flailing limbs. Then silence. "Kairo?" she whispered, frozen. A soft whimper answered. She turned, reaching back. And his head appeared, blood streaking his ear, but his eyes clear, alive. Shaking, she grabbed him and pulled him into the crawl space with her. He collapsed against her for a breath, then stood and nudged her forward, still moving, still leading. Lina looked back once toward the figure still sprawled near the entrance, face hidden in shadow, then turned toward the dark ahead. No more running, no more waiting. She clicked the flashlight back on and followed Kairo deeper into the earth. The tunnel swallowed sound. Each step Lina took echoed like it didn't belong to her, too loud, too close, too alone. The flashlight's beam jittered against concrete, catching old wires, exposed rebar, and scratch marks, too deep to be forgotten. Behind her, Kairo limped, breathing heavy but determined, his body still trembling from the earlier fight. Then the flashlight flickered. Once, twice, and died. "No, no, no," Lina whispered, smacking it with her palm. Darkness surged in. But even in blackness, she felt it. A change, the air shifted heavier, pressed down like a hand. And then, "Curiosity," a voice murmured behind her, too calm, too close. Lina spun, heart exploding in her chest. A shape detached from the wall, tall, patient, and smiling like this was all just a lesson to be learned. Principal Reuben Clay. "It always ruins the good ones," he said softly. Lina tried to run, but he was faster. His hand clamped down on her wrist tight, practiced. Her flashlight hit the ground with a sharp crack. Kairo launched from the dark, teeth bared in fury. Clay didn't flinch. There was a flash, a sound like thunder, and then Kairo collapsed. Blood smeared the floor as the dog thudded into the wall with a whimper that didn't sound real. Lina screamed, clawing at Clay's arm. "You shot him! You—" She didn't get to finish. Clay spun her effortlessly, pinning her arms behind her back as if he'd done it 100 times before. "I didn't want to hurt him," he whispered into her ear, the warmth of his breath turning her skin to ice. "He used to follow orders. Until he didn't." "Used to?" Lina froze. What did that mean? Clay dragged her deeper into the tunnel, flashlight retrieved and now in his hand, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. The tunnel twisted, narrowed, then opened into a space she hadn't imagined. A room. Whitewashed concrete, pipes, steel doors, and cages. At first she thought she was seeing things, but no. 3 children, crammed in one cell, eyes wide, clothes torn, skin pale with fear and dust. 2 boys, 1 girl. The youngest couldn't have been older than 7. They stared at her like she'd fallen from the sky. Clay shoved Lina forward. She stumbled to the ground, scraping her palms. The door behind her clanged shut, locking her in with them. "There," Clay said, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Now you can learn your lesson with company." "Why?" Lina asked, her voice cracked from rage. "Why are you doing this?" Clay tilted his head. "Why does anyone prune a tree?" he said, tone still maddeningly calm. "To shape the future. To remove the weak. To give the strong their place." He stepped closer to the bars. "The world is overgrown, Lina. I'm just trimming it." Lina felt bile rise in her throat. She wanted to scream, to kick, to burn the whole tunnel down. Instead, she looked past him at Kairo, crumpled and unmoving in the dark outside. "You won't win," she hissed. "He'll come back. He always does." Clay gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's hope not," he said, and walked away. The sound of his footsteps faded until there was only silence and breathing. Lina turned slowly. The children were still watching her, pressed into the far corner of the cell. The oldest, a boy around 10, spoke first. "You're new." Lina nodded, her throat tight. "I'm Lina." The girl, tiny, trembling, whispered, "Is the dog okay?" Lina blinked hard. "He will be." She had to believe that. The cell smelled of rust and damp cement. One flickering light overhead buzzed like it was trying to stay awake. Lina sank to the floor, knees drawn up. Her arms shook. Her soul did too. But in her chest burned something sharper than fear. Rage. Resolve. Somewhere out there, Kairo was still breathing. And somewhere above, Sheriff Walsh was still searching. She just had to hold on. For one more night. The door screeched open with a cold metal groan. Clay stepped into the holding cell, his flashlight beam slicing across the children's faces. The shadows recoiled first, then the fear followed. He motioned to Lina without a word. A deputy, or something like it, stood behind him, silent, armed. "Come with me," Clay said flatly. "You asked questions. I'll give answers." Lina didn't move. "What about them?" she demanded, nodding to the kids. Clay's smile returned, thin, detached. "They'll be processed later. For now, you're my guest." The guard took a step in. Lina stood, because she didn't want them to see what fear looked like. Not in her. She followed Clay through a narrow corridor where concrete gave way to sterile white tile. The air changed, thicker now, filtered, recycled, controlled. And then she saw it. A place that should not exist. A room lined with observation glass. Behind it, holding cells, not cages, not obvious, but designed to blend in with clinical cruelty. Inside those rooms were children, small, pale, silent. Some rocked themselves, others sat motionless, eyes like broken clocks. Lina's breath caught. Clay kept walking, talking as if giving a guided tour. The facility was part of an old Cold War project converted after 2006, off-grid, funded through Shell education grants. He tapped a biometric scanner. A heavy door hissed open. "We call this the processing center." The room was massive, sterile, efficient. Laminated charts, steel desks, cabinets marked by dates and numbers, not names. "What is this?" Lina's voice was barely a whisper. Clay looked genuinely pleased, like a child showing off a science fair project. "Placement, intake, orientation, market readiness." He gestured to a glass board scrawled with words she couldn't believe were being said aloud. The children are categorized, he explained. Adaptability, obedience, cultural value. Some are routed toward adoption, some toward training, and a select few, well, let's just say they serve higher purposes. You're talking about selling them. Selling? Clay chuckled. What a primitive word. This is optimization. We take the forgotten, the discarded, and we give them purpose, value. Lina turned away, bile rising in her throat. You're a monster. Clay's tone stayed level. I'm a system. Monsters have teeth. Systems have efficiency. He tapped a nearby screen. A spreadsheet lit up names, dates, flagged codes. One tab read, Subject 001, Jaden Blake. Lina's eyes went wide. He's still alive? Clay caught the glance. Ah, yes, the boy from the posters. He had promise, strong memory, rare genetic traits, last exported to Moldova, I believe, still producing value. Lina's knees almost buckled. Jaden wasn't just a name anymore. He was real, and still out there. Why show me this? She asked, voice brittle. Clay's face turned contemplative. Because one day you'll understand. When the world forgets you, when you realize no one's coming, you'll see the brilliance of it. Every child here is part of something bigger. You're just ahead of schedule. She stared at him, horror burning beneath her ribs, and for the first time she didn't feel like a kid anymore. She felt like a spark, ready to burn. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. Lina stood in the dim light of the cell, the scent of bleach and rust thick in the air. The other children stared at her, not like she was a stranger, but like she might be the last new face they'd ever see. There were 3 of them, all younger than her, all too quiet for kids their age. A little girl sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, braiding and unbraiding a frayed string from the hem of her shirt. Her eyes flicked up once, then back down. Her lips moved silently, as if whispering a name only she could hear. A boy, maybe 8, hugged his knees in the corner, eyes vacant, trembling at the sound of each footstep outside the door. And another, older than the rest, leaned against the back wall, staring straight ahead, fists clenched, jaw locked like stone. Lina stepped forward slowly. "Hey," she said gently. "I'm Lina." Silence. Then the girl whispered, almost inaudible, "Lily." Lina knelt. "That's a beautiful name." The girl didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. "What about you?" Lina asked, turning toward the older boy. He didn't answer. The boy in the corner did. "His name's Marcus," he said quietly, voice thin as paper. "I'm Ethan." Marcus exhaled sharply, like he didn't want his name spoken out loud but also couldn't stop it. 3 names. She'd seen them all before, on posters, taped to gas station windows, pinned to bulletin boards, long faded by sun and time. Names the world had already mourned. Lina swallowed hard. "I know who you are," she said. "People are looking. Your families still remember." Marcus shook his head. "They forgot. Everybody forgets after a while." Lily spoke again, this time to no one in particular. "Clay says we're practice kids, not real ones. Says we don't have real birthdays anymore." Lina felt the fury rise in her chest, hot and bitter. "That's a lie," she said firmly. "You're real. You're still you." Ethan looked up, wide-eyed. Hope flickered. weak but alive. "Is someone coming?" Lina didn't hesitate. "Yes." She crawled closer, lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret too sacred for walls to hear. "There's a dog. His name is Kairo. He's smart, brave. He found the truth and brought it to us." They stared. Lina leaned in further. "He got shot trying to protect me. Twice. And he still came back. You know what that means?" The three shook their heads. "It means he doesn't stop. He doesn't forget. He's coming. And when he finds us, he's not coming alone." Lily's lip quivered. "Dogs remember?" Lina nodded. "The good ones never forget." There was silence again, but a different kind. Not the kind soaked in fear. This one held something gentler, thinner. Hope. Marcus finally looked at her, eyes darker than they should have been at his age. "How do you know it's true?" Lina didn't blink. "Because I'd be dead if it wasn't." That answer seemed to land somewhere deeper than words, in the place behind bones where survival hides. Outside the door a sound echoed, metal scraping, footsteps. The moment broke. The kids shrank back into their quiet places, but not all the way, not anymore, because now they knew three things. They had names, someone remembered, and a dog with amber eyes was on his way. The tunnel narrowed, the air thick with damp, and the weight of history too long hidden. Boots splashed through puddles left by decades of leaks. The walls felt close enough to press in, and still the team moved. Sheriff Walsh at point, Agent Ramirez at his side, both driven not by orders, but by something deeper. Duty, rage, hope. Ahead a single bulb flickered in the darkness, casting sickly yellow light across a steel door at the corridor's end. It was newer than the rest of the structure, reinforced. The kind of door built not to keep danger out, but to keep secrets in. Walsh raised his fist, signaling the team to stop. His chest rose and fell, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. He turned to Ramirez. No words, just a nod. The breaching team moved into position. Charges were placed low and tight, designed to break the lock without collapsing the frame. Every second felt stretched, each tick of the countdown longer than the last. 3, 2, 1. The door blew inward with a controlled blast, smoke and dust billowing into the tunnel. They entered fast. Inside was a chamber that reeked of bleach and ammonia and something far worse, the smell of fear soaked into concrete. Computers lined the walls, screens flickering with data feeds, names, ages, biometric profiles. And in the center, Lina. She was bound to a chair, rope cutting into her wrists, but her eyes were clear bright with defiance, even as tears streaked her dirt-smeared cheeks. Her gaze locked on Walsh the moment he entered. "Sheriff!" Before she could finish, a figure lunged from the shadows. Clay, wild-eyed now, blood from Cairo's bite darkening the torn fabric of his pant leg. He moved like a man with nothing left to lose, a scalpel in one hand, desperation in his teeth. Walsh fired first. A single shot, non-lethal round, center mass. Clay crumpled, gasping, weapon clattering to the floor. Ramirez was on him in a heartbeat, boot to wrist, cuffs snapping closed before he could draw breath to speak. Walsh rushed to Lina, cutting the ropes, pulling her close just long enough to feel her shaking. "You did good, kid," he said, voice rough with relief. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. The room filled with agents now, securing the scene, downloading files, unlocking cell doors deeper in the complex. The radio crackled. children found alive. And then, down the corridor, the sound that made Walsh's heart stop. Pause, unsteady, dragging. But there. Kairo appeared in the doorway, battered beyond reason, ribs heaving with every breath, his coat matted with blood and dirt. But his eyes found Lina's and stayed there. Lina broke free of Walsh's grip, dropping to her knees. "Kairo!" The dog stumbled forward, collapsing at her feet, but not before resting his head against her leg one last time. Walsh knelt beside them, one hand on Kairo's flank, feeling the faint, stubborn rhythm beneath the fur. "Get medics. Now." But Kairo wasn't looking for help. His gaze shifted to Clay, now pinned and furious and beaten in every way that mattered. Kairo's eyes stayed there until they closed. Not in surrender, in peace. Outside, as the first rays of dawn crept over Ravenshill, the sirens began at last. And the storm ended the way it began, with a dog who wouldn't die, a girl who wouldn't give up, and a promise kept. If you'd like, I can help you write the full epilogue or the next chapter of Aftermath and Healing. Just say the word. The handcuffs clicked shut with a finality that rang louder than the sirens still wailing down the valley. Reuben Clay didn't flinch. Not when they dragged him out of the tunnel. Not when the floodlight scorched his face and the town he'd buried in lies stared back at him through the haze of dawn. Not even when the children, silent and blanketed on the sidelines, watched him with eyes too old for their years. Sheriff Donovan Walsh stood with his boots planted in the churned mud, watching as the Predator was loaded into the cruiser. Clay's face, streaked with grime and sweat, remained composed. His tie was still straight, his collar still buttoned. He looked less like a monster and more like the man who once shook hands at school fundraisers. "You won't make it stick," Clay said, his voice smooth, unbothered. "None of this will hold." Walsh didn't answer. There was no point, because the truth was written everywhere now, in the agents cataloging flash drives and ledgers, in the walls smeared with handprints too small to have ever fought back, in the rooms where they'd found folded blankets and empty restraints still warm. Inside Clay's desk drawer they found the ledger. Names, ages, destinations, notes scrawled in clinical shorthand. M. Blake, docile, preferred. Held in Moldova, L. Reyes. Behavioral issues. Reassigned to Orban Sector J. Hartwell, U.S. reclaim pending. Watch closely. Walsh held the notebook in gloved hands, the weight of it not in the paper but in what it confirmed. Ravenshill had smiled at a Predator, had called him principal, had trusted him with its most precious lives. Outside, Lina sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, knees to her chest, staring as Clay was secured inside the cruiser. Kairo lay beside her, bandaged and groggy, but alive. His head rested on her foot, an anchor that tethered both of them to a world that still made sense. "Why isn't he crying?" Lina asked, her voice small, hoarse. Walsh crouched beside her. His gaze followed hers to the van's darkened window, where Clay's silhouette sat motionless. "Because he doesn't think we know everything," Walsh said. "People like him don't show fear. They calculate it." Lina didn't look away. "But we'll find it all, won't we?" He hesitated just a second. Then, "We will." Agent Ramirez approached, face grim, a laptop under one arm, a sealed evidence bag in the other. "We recovered drives from the tunnel, encrypted. But the file structure matches what we've seen in rings in Romania, Vancouver, He wasn't just local. He was part of something global. Walsh nodded, jaw tight. We cut off the head. Ramirez glanced back at the collapsed tunnel. Maybe. But some of its teeth are still in the ground. Because Ethan and Marcus were still missing. Because Chambers, the ghost behind the curtain, wasn't in custody. And because as the sun rose over Ravenshill, it lit the maple tree where Kairo had first dug, where all of this began. Later, as Clay was processed at the temporary command post, his smirk didn't falter. His fingerprints were scanned, his belongings logged, but none of it dented the mask. "I've met men like you before," Walsh said quietly, leaning over the table where Clay sat cuffed. Clay's smile tightened. "Then you know how this ends?" "No," Walsh said. "I don't think you've ever met men like us." By noon, federal teams had spread through Ravenshill, cataloging evidence, comforting families, securing the perimeter. The compound's rooms were no longer secrets. They were crime scenes, testimonies. But the silence that hung over the town wasn't relief. It was the weight of what remained unfinished. Because Marcus and Ethan were gone. Because the ledger contained names they hadn't rescued yet. Because Clay's smirk whispered of plans still in motion. And because somewhere, Chambers was still out there. That night, Walsh stood at the edge of the woods watching as Kairo rested beneath the glow of a portable floodlight. Lina sat beside him, a sketchbook in her lap, her pencil moving softly across the page. "You should rest," Walsh said, his voice gentle. Lina didn't look up. "I can't. Not yet." Her drawing came into view. It was Kairo scarred, but standing tall. And beside him, two boys she'd never met, but whom she drew anyway, because she needed to believe they would find them. Walsh crouched beside her. "You're brave. You know that?" She shrugged. "I'm just trying to do what Kairo did." "And what's that?" "Not give up." At dawn, the alert went out worldwide. Interpol, UN Task Force, cybercrimes units from 3 continents. Chambers's alias, digital footprint, shipping records, all of it broadcast like a net cast wide. And in Ravenshill, a town that had thought itself too small for monsters, families gathered at the square. They left candles beneath the maple tree, photographs, names written on cardboard signs. "We got most of them out," Ramirez said quietly as he joined Walsh on the edge of the crowd. Walsh's gaze didn't waver from the horizon. "Most," he echoed, "but not all." Across the world, in a station no map named, a cargo train rolled through dawn's first light. Inside one of its cars, 2 boys huddled in the dark, knees drawn to chests, eyes hollow. A name scrawled on the wall beside them in chalk Ethan, but above them, in a cabin lit only by instrument glow, Chambers read the alert on his screen and smiled. "Too slow," he murmured. But Ravenshill was no longer silent, and Walsh, Ramirez, Lina and Kairo, whose scars spoke louder than words, were no longer chasing shadows. They were hunting them. And this time, the world was watching. The vet's office didn't smell like healing. It smelled like bleach and fear. Lina sat on a cracked vinyl bench, her hoodie pulled up even though the room was stifling. Her fingers gripped her jeans so tightly the seams left red lines in her palms. Kairo had been wheeled behind those swinging doors 20 minutes ago, his blood still warm on the gurney, his breathing ragged. The last time she saw his eyes, they fluttered, not closed, not gone, but like he was caught between this world and somewhere quieter. Now the silence pressed against her like cotton, A wall clock ticked too loudly. Her mother sat beside her silent. No scolding, no, "What were you thinking?" Just presence. That was worse, because it meant they both knew how thin the thread was. Through the glass pane of the surgical room, Dr. Emerson bent over Cairo's still body. Blood pooled beneath him. Tubes ran into his ribs. The monitor beeped slow, too slow. Agent Ramirez murmured into a phone about warrants and encrypted files. Sheriff Walsh stood outside, his voice a low growl to the press. But none of that mattered to Lina. Only that door. Only one question. Was she too late to save him the way he saved her? Dr. Emerson stepped out, peeling off her gloves. Her scrubs were stained, her expression unreadable. "He's not stable," she said. "2 gunshot wounds, one through the flank, the other near the spine. We got the bullet out, but there's nerve damage, massive blood loss." Lina stood, her legs shaking. "But he'll be okay, right?" The vet knelt in front of her. "If he lives," she said gently, "it'll be because he chooses to." Lina blinked. "What do you mean?" "I've seen this before. Dogs who've given too much. Sometimes their bodies can keep going, but their hearts, they're tired." Lina's throat closed. "But he's still fighting, and he's asking for you." They led her into recovery. Machines hummed, casting sterile light on fur matted with blood. "Kairo," she whispered, sitting beside him, placing her hand on his paw. It was warm, heavy. "You brought us the truth. You found them. You saved us, even when no one believed." She pressed her forehead to his. His breath was faint, but there. "I need you to come back now, because I can't tell the rest of this story without you." His tail didn't move, but his chest rose just a little higher, a tremor, small but his. She stayed, breathing beside him, reminding him without words that she wasn't done needing him yet. Outside, Walsh watched through the glass. 10 years of records, Ramirez muttered, scrolling through decrypted files. "And this dog cracked it in 10 days. Walsh didn't answer. Some truths didn't need saying. They lived in rooms like this, where blood met loyalty and silence spoke loudest. The rain draped the town in gray as the hours passed. Inside the back office, Ramirez froze over his laptop. "Jaden Blake," he murmured. Walsh leaned in. "The first one?" Ramirez nodded. 9 years ago. Disappeared walking home from the pool. No leads, no ransom. He clicked a file. A boy's photo, young blank stare, bruised behind bars. The mark on his jaw undeniable. "We ran a progression match. It's him." Another image. The boy, older now, 15 maybe. Leaner, sharper, but the same eyes. The same mark. The background. Stone walls, barred doors, Cyrillic script. "Chisinau, Moldova," Ramirez said. "Facility flagged 2 months ago. This gives us cause to act." "He's alive?" Walsh breathed. "We believe so." Ramirez scrolled again. Shipment records. A11, unbroken. High retention response. A note. "One memory remains. The dog. Amber eyes. Target avoids mirrors." Then, interview log, A11. Q. What do you remember? A. A dog. Big. Black. Brown. His eyes. I knew him. He knew me. Walsh stared down the hall. Kairo lay still. Lina kept her vigil. Ramirez closed the laptop. "We move in 72 hours. But Sheriff, if we pull this off, we burn down every root of this thing." Walsh nodded and crossed to Lina. "They found someone," he said. "A boy named Jaden. Kairo remembered him. Jaden remembers Kairo." Lina's lips parted, no sound, just a breath. She turned to Kairo, stroked his ear. "Is that why you never stopped?" And then his paw twitched. Once, then again. Walsh hit his radio. "Get Emerson now!" But Lina didn't move. She leaned close. "You remembered him, didn't you?" Cairo's eyes fluttered, not open yet, but moving, just enough, toward her. The call came at 3:42 a.m. Ramirez's voice crackled. "It's him. Jaden's alive. Asked if the dog made it." Walsh closed his eyes, turned toward Lina. "He remembers Kairo," he said. And as if the words were a key, Cairo's tail lifted. Thump. Again. Thump. Lina burst into tears. "Kairo?" His eyes dull, drugged but open. And they found her. The vet rushed in, adjusting lines. Pulse rising. He's fighting. Lina pulled a faded photo from her coat. A boy and a younger Kairo side by side. "I found it under the floorboards," she whispered. "The first week we moved in. I think he buried it when they took Jaden." The vet stared at the photo, then the dog. "He's been waiting." Lina nodded. "And now he knows he doesn't have to wait anymore." Outside, the dawn stretched pale light across Ravenshill. Sirens faded, news crews packed up. But in one small room, a girl's hand on a dog's fur, a sheriff at her side, and a bond long buried but never broken. They held on. Because memory isn't always loud. Sometimes it returns in a tail's thump, or in a boy's whisper through the dark. The dog's still alive, right? And tonight, it was. Because love never forgets. And neither did Kairo. The next morning dawned clear, the kind of gentle light that softened the hard edges of Ravenshill. Dew clung to the grass, and for the first time in a long time, the town felt like it could breathe again. Jaden sat on the porch steps, barefoot, with a chipped enamel mug of tea warming his hands. He hadn't slept much, but it didn't matter. His eyes were brighter today, not free of shadows, but no longer swallowed by them. Kairo lay at his side, his head resting against Jaden's knee. The dog's breathing was slow, but steady. His bandages had been changed. The worst of the fever had broken overnight. And when Jaden had woken, the first thing he'd felt was the soft weight of fur against his shin. Lina appeared at the side gate, her sneakers kicking up tiny puffs of dust. She didn't knock. She didn't speak at first. She just walked to the steps and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I brought you something," she said quietly, pulling a small box from her jacket pocket. Jaden raised an eyebrow, curious. Inside was a string bracelet, simple, frayed at the edges, woven from green and black threads. "I made it at camp a long time ago," Lina said. "It was supposed to be for my brother, but I think it's yours now." Jaden hesitated, then took it, turning it over in his fingers like it might disappear if he wasn't careful. "Thanks," he said, his voice still hoarse from disuse but stronger than the day before. She glanced down at Kairo. "How's he doing?" Jaden looked at the dog, his hand finding its way to Cairo's ear, scratching gently behind the scar. "Better, I think." "He wouldn't let me stay away," Lina said softly. "I kept trying, but he kept digging, kept finding ways to remind me." Jaden nodded, his gaze distant. "He did the same for me." They sat like that for a while, watching the sun creep higher over the rooftops, listening to the world remember how to be quiet. Inside the house, Sheriff Walsh stood at the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching them. His shoulders were heavy with the weight of cases still open, of names not yet crossed off the ledgers they'd recovered. But for now, he let himself take in the scene outside. 2 kids and a dog, piecing themselves back together in small, steady ways. Agent Ramirez stepped in from the front porch, wiping sleep from his eyes. "Any word from the task force?" Walsh asked. "Interpol tracked Chambers' last signal to a cargo port near Varna. Bulgarian authorities are combing through manifests now." "They'll find him?" Walsh nodded but didn't look away from the window. "They'd better." Ramirez followed his gaze. "They're healing, you know." Walsh exhaled slowly. "I hope so. God knows we need some good to come from this." That afternoon, Jayden helped Kairo down the porch steps into the yard. The dog's gait was slow, uneven, but determined. He paused at the maple tree, nose low to the ground, tail giving the faintest wag, as if the scent of the earth itself was an old friend. Jayden knelt beside him, fingers brushing the bark. "You knew I was here," he murmured. Kairo leaned his weight against Jayden's shoulder, closing his eyes, content. From the house, Lina emerged carrying 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. She handed one to Jayden and flopped down in the grass beside him. "You know what's funny?" she said between bites. "The first time I saw him digging under this tree, I thought he was just stubborn. I didn't know he was looking for you." Jayden took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "Maybe he was looking for both of us." Lina grinned. "Maybe." That night, Sheriff Walsh called the kids inside. He set out mugs of cocoa and turned on the porch light, casting a soft circle of safety around the steps. They talked, in halting bits at first, about normal things, school lunches, books they half remembered, the way the creek smelled after a storm. And as the stars came out, Jayden spoke of the tunnels, of names he'd heard whispered, of faces he hadn't dared look at for too long. "There were so many," he said, voice tight. "So many I couldn't help." Walsh rested a hand on his shoulder. "You survived. That's more than they ever wanted you to do. And now we'll find the rest." Jayden didn't answer, but the way his eyes flicked toward Kairo, curled up nearby, said enough. He believed. In the weeks that followed, Ravenshill became a place of quiet rebuilding. The maple tree became a gathering point. Families left notes there for loved ones still missing. Candles burned at its roots at night. And Kairo, he kept digging, not out of need, but as if the act itself was sacred now, a ritual of memory. Jayden added to his box of small treasures: a feather from Lina's yard, a folded paper crane a neighbor's daughter gave him, the hospital wristband he'd worn home from Moldova. And one morning, before dawn, he took a small carving knife to a piece of driftwood he'd found by the creek. Slowly, patiently, he shaped it into something simple. A dog, ears crooked, tail high. He placed it at the base of the maple tree and walked away. The hunt for Chambers went on. Interpol raids, ports seized, cargo containers opened. Each brought new names, new faces, new hope, and new heartbreak. But Ravenshill no longer stood silent. It stood ready. And at its heart, a boy and his dog proved what the world too often forgot: that loyalty doesn't fade, that memory doesn't break, and that sometimes the fiercest kind of survival is the kind done together. The wind in Ravenshill had changed. It no longer whispered warnings or carried the weight of secrets. It rustled gently now, cool and clean, scattering golden leaves across sidewalks and porches, over rooftops, and across the old school lawn. Except the school was no longer there. Where once stood that cold bricked building with its smiling predator and locked basement of horrors, there now rose something else, something warmer, modest, open, a place with wide windows and murals painted by children. The sign above read Oak Ridge County Community Center, and beneath it, a girl walked slowly alongside a dog whose steps were no longer swift, but no less certain. Lina wore a navy hoodie and a wool scarf that trailed in the breeze. Her hands gripped the leash loosely, trusting. Kairo, beside her, moved with a slight limp in his right hind leg. His fur was speckled with more gray now than before. The scar on his side was barely visible beneath the coat that had grown back in, thicker in patches. They stopped near a bench under the maple tree, that maple tree. Its trunk was still marked faintly by where claws once tore at the earth to bring truth into daylight. Kairo sniffed the grass and exhaled, a deep, satisfied breath. Lina knelt beside him and rested her forehead gently against his. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did." The dog blinked, eyes amber as ever, then nudged her chin with his nose. A boy's voice called from the center doors, "They're starting!" It was Jaden. He stood beneath a banner that read, "Remembrance and Renewal." The town's first annual gathering since the shutdown, where names were spoken aloud, not in mourning, but in restoration. Parents were there, survivors too, some still wide-eyed, some older now, but all changed. Lina and Kairo approached slowly. Outside the building, a garden had been planted, a circle of white stones, each with a child's name painted across the surface. 23 names. Beside them, a new plaque had been mounted. In honor of those found, in memory of those still waiting, this community chooses truth, chooses light. Lina's mom stood nearby, holding a thermos in one hand, eyes misted but smiling. Sheriff Walsh was there too, dressed in plain clothes, not uniform. His badge now clipped casually to his belt like an afterthought. He looked thinner, older, but no less solid. He bent down and scratched Kairo behind the ears. "He looks good," the sheriff said. "He's earned it," Lina replied. "Yeah," Walsh nodded. "We all have, thanks to him." They stood in silence as the ceremony began. A bell was rung 23 times, each name read aloud by a different child. Jaden read one, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. When the last bell fell quiet, no one clapped. Instead, they let the silence speak. Let the breeze move between them. Let healing echo where hurt once hid. Later, as the sun dipped lower and the center emptied out, Lina and Kairo took one last loop around the garden. He moved slower now, but he didn't stop. She didn't rush him. Somewhere overhead, geese cut across the sky in a wide V, their cries sharp, ancient. The season was changing, but the town had already begun to. Lina reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her own addition to the garden. On it, a paw print in ink, a girl's name, and beneath it, in crooked handwriting, "Because one bark changed everything." The auditorium wasn't large, just enough seats for maybe 100 folding chairs, a makeshift podium borrowed from the town hall, and a projector humming softly in the back corner. But tonight, the room felt full in a different way, not with noise, but with presence. Lina sat in the second row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Kairo rested by her boots, his head stretched out across the floor, tail occasionally thumping when someone he recognized passed by. Next to her, Sheriff Donovan Walsh adjusted his collar. He wasn't in uniform, not tonight. Just a dark sweater, jeans, and that steady, unmovable expression he wore when emotions ran too close to the surface. The lights dimmed. At the front of the room, Jaden stepped up to the microphone. He no longer looked like the silent, half-forgotten child they had rescued from that underground world months ago. His shoulders were still thin, his voice still soft, but there was clarity in his gaze now, a stillness earned. He took a breath. The mic caught a slight tremble in his inhale, but when he spoke his voice carried. "I used to think no one would ever find me, that people forgot, that time would just move on." A hush fell over the room. But someone did remember. Not a crowd, not the whole world, just one. And he didn't need to speak. He didn't need to be human. He just needed to come back. Jaden's eyes dropped briefly to where Kairo lay at Lina's feet. The dog's ears twitched. His amber gaze didn't leave the stage. "This isn't a speech about what happened," Jaden continued. "Because some things you don't have to explain. You just carry them, like scars, or shadows, or names." He paused. A click from the projector and image faded onto the screen behind him. A close-up of the memorial garden, the stones, the plaque, a paw print. "I'm here to talk about what we do with those things, with the hurt. We can hide them, or we can plant them, let them grow into something better." His voice cracked a little there, but he didn't back away. "Every year now this town will remember not just what was done, but what was undone, not just what was taken, but what we fought to take back." In the silence that followed, someone in the back wiped their eyes. "And if one dog can find his way home to remind us, then maybe there's still time, maybe more still wait. And maybe we can be brave enough to keep looking." He stepped back from the mic. No applause followed. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because it didn't need to be said with hands. It was already written in the silence, in the way people leaned forward, in the way Lina reached down and gently ran her fingers along Kairo's back. Sheriff Walsh let out a breath beside her. "He's going to change people," he muttered, "whether he knows it or not." Lina smiled, her eyes never leaving the stage. "He already has." After the event, the crowd filtered out into the cold. Flyers were handed out, information on missing children programs, recovery initiatives, therapy services for survivors. But most held on to something quieter, a shift, a seed. Jaden stepped off the stage and was immediately embraced by a woman whose niece had never been found. She didn't say a word, just held him, and he let her. Kairo rose slowly and made his way toward the boy. Jaden knelt. "I saw you before I even knew my name again," he whispered, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "You remembered for both of us." Kairo leaned into him, steady and strong. No bark, no cry, just presence. That night, a new page was added to the town newsletter, titled simply, "Lessons in Legacy, What Ravenshill Refuses to Forget." And just beneath the title, in small, simple text, "Sometimes it takes a child to see what's been hidden. Sometimes it takes a dog to lead us back to the truth." The wind moved gently through the leaves of the old maple tree, brushing the grass in slow, steady waves. Its roots curled deep into the earth, twisting beneath the soil like veins, quiet witnesses to everything that had passed above them. Lina sat cross-legged, her back resting against the broad trunk. Jaden lay on his side nearby, a sketch pad resting on his chest, half filled with charcoal outlines of faces he was only now learning to remember. And nestled between them, his head resting on both their feet, was Kairo. His breathing was slower these days. Not weak, just unhurried, as if the weight he'd carried for so long had finally eased off his shoulders. The sun slanted low through the trees, catching flecks of gold in his coat and turning his eyes when they opened to molten amber. Lina reached down, brushing her fingers through the fur behind his ear. "He never forgot," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a vow. Jaden nodded but said nothing. He didn't need to, because some truths don't require sound to be heard. Some memories speak through presence, through closeness, through the way a dog chooses to rest not beside you, but between you, like a bridge made of loyalty and breath. They had returned here, back to where the trail had started, the place where Lina had first seen him, bleeding and broken, caught between sky and stone. The place where she had chosen, without question or hesitation, to crawl toward danger for someone the world had already given up on. The same patch of ground where, months later, he had clawed at the earth and unearthed not just a metal box, but the secret history of a town that had chosen silence over truth. Now that silence was gone, and in its place something else had grown. Jaden sat up and placed a small item between them. It was a stone, smooth, rounded, painted with the soft outline of a paw print. On the underside, a single word had been written in his uneven, slowly recovering handwriting. "Remember." Lina looked down at it, then at him. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Kairo shifted, letting out a low sigh, the kind dogs make when they know they're safe, when they know their job is finally done. Above them a bird called once from the treetops. The wind answered. Jaden leaned back on his elbows. "You think he knows it's over?" Lina smiled faintly. "I think he knew before we did." The afternoon light faded to gold, and then to amber, matching the color of the eyes that had changed everything. Kairo blinked once, then again. He didn't move to stand, didn't nudge for attention or bark for affirmation. Instead, he let his head sink deeper into the grass, body warm between the two children who were no longer just victims or survivors, but something more. Witnesses, protectors, carriers of a truth no one could bury again. His eyes closed, and in that silence, not heavy but earned, there was no fear, no sorrow, just peace. The kind that only comes after a trail long traveled, a mission fulfilled, and a home found not in walls but in hearts that remember. Lina placed her hand gently over his chest, felt the rhythm still there. "For every step you walked alone," she whispered, "we walk with you now." Jaden placed the painted stone at the base of the tree, and as the sun sank behind the hills, casting their shadows long and soft across the earth, the three of them remained, girl, boy, and dog, at the place where it had begun, and where, in many ways, it would always remain. Not an ending, just the trail that stays. Sometimes it takes the silent loyalty of a dog to remind us of the truths we've buried, the stories left untold, and the strength we all carry, especially in the smallest hearts. Kairo wasn't just a German shepherd. He was a survivor, a witness, and a protector. And in every moment bleeding on the rocks, growling at danger, or simply resting between the children he saved, he showed us something we often forget, that love doesn't need language and courage isn't always loud. Through his eyes, a town remembered. Through his footsteps, justice found its way back. And through the bond he built with Lina and Jaden, we're reminded of the incredible power of compassion, how one life, even four-legged, can ripple through generations. German shepherds are more than working dogs. They are memory keepers, truth seekers, guardians of those who can't yet speak for themselves. So if this story stays with you, let it do more than move you. Let it inspire you to look closer, to care deeper, and to always listen to the ones who can't speak. Because sometimes they're the ones who save us.